You're listening to WLPN 105.5 FM in Chicago, and you're listening to Labor Express Radio, Chicago's only English language labor news and current affairs radio program. News for people by working people. I'm your host, Jerry Mead Lucero, and this is the Sunday, December 2nd, 2018 edition of Labor Express. On tonight's episode of Labor Express, we'll hear from workers at the one remaining hotel in Chicago still out on strike. United HRE Local 1 has signed contracts with over 26 hotels in the past couple months, but the Cambria Hotel in downtown Chicago is still refusing to agree to a fair contract. Instead, unlike all the other Chicago area hotels, the Cambria is looking to increase the workload for housekeepers. Also on tonight's program, as 2018 nears a close, we start to think here at Labor Express about what were some of the most significant events or developments in the labor movement over the past year. Certainly near the top of any list for 2018 would be the MeToo movement. It didn't start in 2018, but certainly it picked up steam in this past year. But what the mainstream media has failed to cover is how working class women and the organizations that represent them have developed unique, concrete ways of combating sexual harassment and gender-based violence. One of the leading examples is the Fight for 15, which in October held a one-day strike of McDonald's workers and others to protest the persistence of sexual harassment on the job for low-wage workers. We'll hear more about that situation later on tonight's program. But first, Labor Express radio reporter Marnie Goodfriend went out to the picket line at the Cambria Hotel last week to talk with hotel workers about why the management of the Cambria Hotel seems to be resisting a fair contract. Here on Labor Express, we've been reporting on both the Chicago hotel strike and the nationwide Marriott hotel strikes since they were launched last September. The good news so far is that all but one of the Chicago hotel strikes has ended with new contracts that meet the union's key demands. Likewise, the Marriott hotel strikes in Boston, San Jose, and Oakland have ended with new contract gains as well. However, strikes are still ongoing at Marriott hotels in San Francisco and Hawaii. And in Chicago, the Cambria Hotel is the last holdout, with the strike there entering its 12th week soon. Cambria management has agreed to offer hotel workers year-round health care, one of the union's primary demands, but unlike at every other hotel that has signed a new contract in Chicago, the Cambria is demanding an increased workload for its housekeeping staff. The current workloads already put a great strain on housekeepers. A recent study conducted by United HRE Local 1 found that the vast majority of housekeepers have suffered injuries from their heavy workloads. You can read the results of that study, which is linked up on our Facebook page at laborexpress.org. As you will hear in the following piece, workers also know that higher workloads mean cutbacks and layoffs of housekeeping staff, so they are refusing to give in to the Cambria management's demands. Marnie spoke with two Cambria hotel workers. Yolanda is a housekeeper and Dan is a hotel bartender.
So you've been at the Cambria Hotel for 12 years, yes. And you're in housekeeping?
Yes, I'm housekeeping.
What does your work consist of?
Oh, clean the rooms, clean the bathroom, make the beds, dusting the room.
And the Cambria Hotel, how similar or different is the Cambria Hotel to many of the other Chicago hotels?
Because our room is more big one. It's more space, more staff in the room. Is the difference, the other hotel.
So Yolanda, can you tell me when the Chicago hotel workers went on strike, and then when did your hotel, the Cambria, go on strike?
Oh, the next Monday, we go outside. Mm-hmm.
And how many days has it been since you went on strike?
70 days.
That's a long time.
Yes, a long time.
So tell me, what happened with the other hotels? The other hotels came to some agreement between the management and the workers, but your hotel is the only hotel in Chicago that has not. What's happened?
I know I'm surprised too, because the other hotel I propose other thing, but my hotel, they propose increment my rooms.
So the Cambria Hotel management has proposed to increase the workload of the housekeepers. Is that correct?
Yes.
How much do they want to increase your load?
2 more rooms.
How many rooms do you clean right now?
13 rooms.
How long does it take to clean about 13 rooms?
Let me explain you first. 1 year ago, this hotel renovation the room. So they put more staff inside the room. For example, they put more TV. The bed is more big one, and they put more furniture, and I need more time for clean that one.
Some people have compared the room to a small studio apartment. Would it be comparable to a small studio apartment then after the renovation?
The size is the same. The problem, they are increment more staff. This is the problem. Yeah.
So this after the renovation, the same room takes more time to clean?
Yes. And now it's impossible we finish. Before go to the strike, we make it overtime sometimes. And we work overtime too because, sometimes we the rooms hang up. Sometimes we live in one room because we not finished. When the new renovation, we not finished clean 13 rooms.
And when did the renovation take place again? Can you tell me?
May, I think, is the finish yeah.
So it was just this year that the rooms became more difficult to clean. Okay. Were you experiencing some of the other issues that other Chicago hotel workers were facing in addition to the workload of cleaning the rooms? What other issues are you facing as hotel workers that are similar to the other hotel workers that went out on strike?
Oh yeah, we had a problem, the green program. This is more affect us. I think the whole hotel. Yeah.
So does the Cambria Hotel now supply panic buttons as well for housekeepers?
Yeah, they put it 1 month before the other hotel has.
Excellent. What about the healthcare issue? I know that was one of the defining issues of the healthcare workers' strike about six weeks to 8 weeks ago. Are you guys experiencing the same issues with attempting to get year-long healthcare? Is that also a big issue for you guys?
Oh yes. Always sometimes this company they not pay when before the strike the company not pay the insurance, so now they not want to pay no more.
So do you have year-long healthcare coverage right now under your current contract?
No.
So this is still a big sticking point for union members here, is that you need to have healthcare all year long.
Yes.
Even when you're not working for a couple days at a time. Can you tell me?
For example, when you not have seniority, sometimes the company send laid off, and you not have insurance. You not have benefits too.
How often does this happen to workers at the Cambria Hotel?
A few ladies is in the winter time. I think 4 months. The other ladies 3 months.
So there are 3 and 4 month chunks of time where people don't have full health insurance.
Yeah. I think 5 ladies they not had insurance for 4 months.
And are there any stories of people that you know, things that have happened to people where not having health insurance has really impacted their life?
Yeah, it's really impacted because for me, when I started working in this hotel, so I don't have seniority, so I have problem because my kids is more young. So when they needed, when they had cough, we don't have insurance and we don't have money for pay the medicine.
So just being able to go to the doctor for your children has become an issue during that 3 to 4 month period. Is that correct?
Yes, and for me too.
Yes, of course. Yeah, mothers have to take care of themselves too. Absolutely. Yeah. So right now, the Cambria Hotel is the only hotel that is still out on strike in Chicago. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. What is that like for you, knowing that the other hotels have negotiated their contracts with the other workers?
Oh, I feel really sad and angry. Yeah.
So what are the basic things that you need in order for the workers to go back to work? What kind of things does management have to do for the workers to go back to work here?
Oh, the company signed my contract. No more rooms, no more room. I don't like it. The company increment more room for us. It's not okay. Let me explain. I had seniority. Okay, I know the company signed the contract for 2 more rooms. I had job, but the point is, my other co-workers they don't have jobs. So
can you explain that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, for example, I accept they sign the contract, so they give me 2 more rooms. But this is the problem when the ladies down. I explain you the 5 ladies laid off in the winter. So It's not only in the winter. Is yeah. If I said the contract for 15 rooms, they don't have more job in all the years, not only in winter. Is I clean 2 rooms more, so they don't have more job, and I clean this job.
So the hotel is holding back on the 12-month health insurance in exchange for increasing your workload from 13 rooms to 15 rooms every day. And why is that not an acceptable trade-off for you?
Because I kill myself. I kill myself, and the other person, they know her job. It's not only problem me. It's the problem, in the city, because the company cut the job.
What are the physical demands of cleaning 13 rooms in one day?
Oh, we feel more pain in the shoulder and the back and the necks, because now the furniture is more heavy and the mattress is heavy.
And this is all due to the renovation from this past spring.
Yeah, they put more stuff in the renovation.
Is there anything else you want to tell people what do you want to tell people who pass by the Cambria Hotel and see it? Today I see about 15 to 18 of your coworkers who are walking around with strike signs, who are very polite. They're sitting there and they're saying, we want justice for the kind of work that we do. We feel we deserve a fair wage and health insurance. What would you say to people who walk by and maybe don't understand why workers might be on strike? What would you say to those folks?
I say I just strive for my dignity and for more better job. I explain that one.
And I don't just see housekeepers out on the picket line. I see a lot of other workers on the picket line. So everyone's out there in support of a fair contract, but also wanting to preserve the workload of housekeepers. Is that correct? What other kind of workers are out on the picket line today besides housekeepers?
Oh, is that the doorman, the bartenders, the cook, and the barista? Yeah.
Right, so they're out here in support of a fair contract, but also wanting to preserve the workload of housekeepers. Is that correct?
Yes, they are support us.
Who's sitting with us here today? We have someone sitting with us here today. He's not a housekeeper, though.
No, he is done.
Hi, Don. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Don, what do you do at the Cambria Hotel?
I'm a bartender at the Cambria, and I've been there for 14 years.
And what was the sticking point for you in deciding that this is a worthwhile contract to fight for, something that you're willing to stand on a picket line for up to 70 days now? What really was the breaking point for you where you thought this is something we have to stand up for as workers?
Well, we joined a citywide strike in September, and the main fight back then in September was fighting for year-round health insurance. That issue mainly affects workers with lower seniority. They get laid off in the slow time in winter and lose their health insurance. So that was the big struggle back then for a just contract, and that's what's been won at all the other hotels in the city.
So you guys are now sticking it out so you can have your year-long health insurance, but you also want to protect the workload of housekeepers. Is that correct?
Yeah, the reason we're still on strike is that the company we work for have refused to sign the citywide contract without us agreeing to increase the workload of the housekeepers in our hotel. This is something that was not agreed to with any other hotel in the city. Every other hotel in the city signed contracts that did not increase workload, and we're not going to be treated like second-class citizens.
As I walked by, I saw several notices taped on the inside windows of the hotel. They weren't put up by you, were they?
No, that's the company negotiating through the window.
What? And I think you told me that this is not the first version of the poster that's gone up. Can you tell me what this is about, or what is the company trying to accomplish with this tactic?
I think they're trying to intimidate us. I think they're also trying to just message to the guest. frankly, we don't even read them notices anymore.
So what is your hope that what's the outcome do you want? What outcome do you want out of the strike? You're on day 70. It's starting to get cold. You guys are very hardy people. You're out here every single day. You're looking for a fair contract. Is that right?
Yeah, we're looking to be treated the same as every other hotel worker, union hotel worker in the city of Chicago, and we'll be out here as long as it takes.
Are you seeing any support from other hotel workers? I know you guys started this struggle together in September, and all the other hotels in Chicago have come to have negotiated an agreement, a contract. Have you seen any support from other hotels since you're the last one standing? The Cambria Hotel is the last one standing here.
Yeah, we've had great support in solidarity actions, even in the last week when it's been very cold. We've also had workers from the Hilton Chicago raise money to buy us lunch, and from one other hotel that I can't recall. But yeah, we've had great solidarity in that respect.
I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you to Marnie Goodfriend for that audio. There's more about the ongoing strike of workers at the Cambria Hotel, including how the workers are asking for support from the public, which you can find at our Facebook page at laborexpress.org. You're listening to Labor Express Radio News for people by working people. As I mentioned at the top of tonight's program, the MeToo movement has certainly been one of the most important developments in the past year for working people, especially women. But little of the media attention on the movement has focused on the way in which working class women, unions, and worker centers are developing strategies and tactics that concretely address and prevent the type of sexual harassment and violence women face on the job. In covering the hotel worker strike over the past several months, we've discussed how organizations like Arise Chicago Workers Center were behind the Chicago Hotel Workers Sexual Harassment Ordinance, which mandated panic buttons for hotel workers, among other measures. Back in September, Fight for 15 held one-day strikes nationwide of McDonald's workers, who were in many cases joined by other low-wage workers, to specifically protest and call attention to the persistence of sexual harassment on the job. Later Beat TV covered the rally that was held here in Chicago that day. Here are the voices of some of the working women who spoke out at that rally.
My name is Adriana Alvarez. I am a Chicago McDonald's worker, and I'm on strike today. I'm also a single mother of a 6-year-old boy. His name is Manny. I represent thousands of fast food workers who are striking across the country against sexual harassment. Fast food workers have never gone on strike to demand an end to this kind of sexual harassment that we go throughout the workday. No single worker in any industry in the last century has gone on strike for sexual harassment. So today, fast food workers, just like me, are breaking the silence. We're taking this historic step, and we're going on strike to tell McDonald's no more sexual harassment.
You will hear me today. I will not stay in silence. Good morning. My name is Aisha Townsend. I am a fast food worker at McDonald's on the south side of Chicago. But when the sexual harassment started happening to me, it was drastically affected my life and my personal respect. You will not want this to happen to your brothers or your sister or even your daughters or your sons. So as a McDonald's worker, I am speaking up, I am shouting loud to make sure that my children, my brothers, sisters, and fellow co-workers get the respect that they deserve. I will not stay silent.
En este día de la historia moderna,
You will hear me today. I will not stay silent. My name is Teresa Cervantes. I am a McDonald's fast food worker, and I've been working for them for the past 20 years. I worked at several stores throughout the years, including the Rock and Roll flagship store. I currently work here behind the doors of this corporate headquarters location. I'm speaking out today because I want to talk about management in one of the stores that I worked in. I'm extremely nervous to talk about this, just like we're all scared. But over the past few weeks, I've been empowered by my sisters standing next to me. Today, I'm so much stronger because of them. The sexual harassment I've witnessed and experienced has been happening since the day I began working for McDonald's, over 2 decades ago. These experiences I'm sharing with you to prove that sexual harassment has been happening for more than 20 years, and still to this day. One day, I went into the management office of my store looking for my boss to ask him if he could change my schedule. I needed him to adjust my hours because my kids were starting school the following week. I'm a proud mother of 2, including a daughter who now works in fast food, so my fight for dignity and respect represents her as well. When I went into the office, another manager was there. Instead of Another manager was there instead and asked me why I came into the office. What she said to me was unimaginable and completely embarrassing. She said to me, "What are you doing in here? Do you want some dick?" I was speechless and searching for a response. She must have assumed that because the male manager had a terrible reputation and was known for having sex with workers in his office and the bathrooms of the store. I told her, I'm not that kind of worker, and I'm here to ask about my schedule and nothing else. This is what workers like me have to deal with: sexual propositions, vulgar language, rude comments, humiliation, and embarrassment. It's a shame that management expected me to have sexual intentions when I was only trying to handle a work-related issue. I was only trying to be the responsible, hard worker that I've always been. But this is only one of my experiences. My coworkers from stores I've worked in have been victims of the sexual acts I speak about. I've witnessed what goes on behind the closed office doors and what my female workers have told me in private. To this day, I still don't understand how sexual harassment is still a problem when managers have claimed they've gone through trainings. They haven't gotten any training about sexual harassment and inappropriate workplace behavior. This is the most important lesson that they need to learn. I'm on strike and standing here today for change. I believe that fast food workers in each store, no matter our color or our race, should come together and demand an end to sexual harassment. We're saying enough to sexual abuse and harassment. We all demand dignity and respect. We all deserve a clean and protected environment. It's important to fight a nonviolent fight for justice, and I'm doing that today by breaking my silence. Sexual harassment is a universal issue. It's a disease. It's like leprosy, and we need to find a cure for it, and we need to end it. Brothers and sisters, please listen and hear us. It's time to end all of the sexual harassment in our workplace. Going on strike today and speaking out will help stop this from happening in our workplaces. This will help improve our lives and help us do something good for our families, our neighbors, and our entire community. This is a day in modern history that women can use their voices. Anyone can use their voice to demand change. This is not old century times when free speech wasn't allowed. We can speak up for ourselves. Let's continue to break that silence and keep the world aware. And we're going to keep fighting and creating history so our youth can have a better and respectful future.
Today, thousands of workers across the country have stepped out of the shadows and into the picket lines, breaking the silence to change the unacceptable culture of harassment and violence in the workplace like McDonald's.
They have bravely come forward to hold this multi-million-dollar company accountable for allowing rampant sexual assault and harassment to fester under their golden arches. And we are here today to stand in solidarity as a collective with this powerful group of worker leaders to say Me Too and time is up, McDonald's. We can no longer accept that 1 out of 2 workers experience workplace sexual violence under your watch. We cannot accept that 75% of workers are retaliated against when they speak up. And we cannot and will not accept McDonald's getting away with it.
I've worked in the industry for over 10 years. I've been a server, fast food worker, barista, and more. I'm a tipped worker who has been sexually harassed. There have been several occasions where I was backed into a corner of a dark room by my boss, kissed by my managers, my legs were groped, my dignity damaged by unwanted sexual advancements by my coworkers, put in uncomfortable situations where it was just easier to say yes. Well, not anymore. One of the most powerful moments of my life is when I learned to stand up simply by saying no. But it's not always that simple. When you feel that your livelihood is threatened and that you won't be able to bring home a paycheck, it can be really scary. You feel intimidated. We have our lives to lead, and we have bills to pay, and kids to feed, and we can no longer afford to live in a society where sexual harassment is normalized in the restaurant culture. It's time to say, I'm not on the menu. Time's up, McDonald's. It's time to restore dignity to the millions of restaurant workers who tirelessly serve our meals, cook our food, and provide nourishment for the entire country. Today I'm standing alongside Rock Chicago, Fight for 15, and our coalition, and McDonald's workers in solidarity with women who are striking by walking off their jobs and standing up against sexual harassment in the restaurant industry. You are all the bravest people in the world. You are saying no more. I offer my full support and love today. Let's rise up against normalized bad behavior and help restore the dignity that is inherent in every person. Thank you.
Just 3 months ago, we were standing at this same spot, and we demanded that, we were scared out of our minds. But then again, we had brave workers. They were courageous. They told their stories, and guess what McDonald's did? Nothing. We've seen in the news that sexual harassment is happening to others within more major corporations, just like CBS, and how Hollywood actresses have filed lawsuits against their CEOs and media moguls. Now, more than ever, it is imperative that fast food workers take action and use our voices in the same way to hold McDonald's and other fast food chains accountable. The public does not know what we go through behind the counters, the cash registers, even in the bathrooms, in the janitor's closets. But today, the world will find out more. We're not going to tolerate or continue to stay solid anymore. 40% of fast food workers have been sexually harassed on the job. That's almost half of us. But what's even worse is that it's 60% higher than any other industry. When fast food workers filed EEOC complaints, again, it was 2 years ago, and you know what McDonald's did? Nothing. The company has once again ignored us. Some of us workers were even retaliated against with shortened hours or even fired because we spoke up. This just shows how much respect McDonald's has for us, how they mistreat their employees. How can the world's second largest corporation, who profits from our backs billions of dollars every year, continue to treat us like this? It's unacceptable. It's really sad that we have to go on strike to demand McDonald's attention to the harassment that we're facing every day in our stores. But like we've always done, we're going to continue to walk off our jobs. We're going to continue to speak up for dignity and respect, and we deserve to march for change until McDonald's cleans up its act.
I want to thank Andrew Friend and the rest of the folks at Larrabee TV for making that audio available to us. We need to take a station ID break, but when we return, more about low-wage workers striking back against sexual harassment. You're listening to Labor Express Radio, which calls the only English language labor news and current affairs radio program. Occasionally here on Labor Express, we air segments from our friends at Building Bridges, your community and labor report on WBAI in New York City. Building Bridges aired a great segment following the September strike by McDonald's workers protesting sexual harassment, featuring an interview with Annalisa Orlick, professor of history at Dartmouth College, and author of We Are All Fast Food Workers Now, The Global Uprising Against Poverty Wages. I thought tonight's program was a perfect opportunity to air this piece for you.
This is Building Bridges, your community and labor report with Mimi Rosenberg and Ken Nash.
Fight for 15 embraces MeToo movement in striking McDonald's.
One day I went into work.
I was coming into work
on the night shift.
I was taking orders.
I was at the sink.
He would physically grab me by the waist.
He would come up from the back.
He would just always be touching you.
He would ask me for pictures of myself.
He would talk about just different sexual activities.
He would ask me if I want to meet up with him.
Ask me, what position do I play in the bedroom?
He got up behind me.
She proceeded to stick her hand in between my legs.
Pointed at his genitals.
Showed me photos of her body.
Pulled me in, shut the door, and tried to kiss me.
Followed me to the bathroom.
My supervisor has touched my behind.
Always slapped my ass.
Grabbing my waist.
Tried to kiss me.
Touched me with her hand.
Would touch my breast.
Grab my leg.
Grab my arm.
Grabbed me like real roughly.
Grabbed.
Touching.
Rubbing up.
No, this is not okay.
And I tell him to stop and he keep doing it.
The only thing I could do was push him off.
Tell him to stop.
I told him stop. I went outside and cried.
And if you tell him to stop, he'll be like, oh, you know you want it.
They know how to corner you in.
I moved different stores.
Asked for at least a change of location.
I ended up working somewhere else. I requested different hours.
I just didn't feel safe.
I just kind of stayed quiet.
I didn't know who to talk about it or how to go about telling someone.
I reported at least 5 or 6 times.
I reported to the general manager that day.
Spoke to the GM about the situation and let her know what was going on.
I didn't want to tell them because I was afraid of losing my job.
The owner got mad because I called him while he was in church.
He said it's pretty much my word against yours.
That it was my fault.
Get used to it or it is not the workplace for you.
He did absolutely nothing.
You either go along with the flow or work somewhere else.
The store manager did not do anything.
There was nothing done.
And she did nothing about it at all.
Nothing happened.
Nothing changed. It seemed like it got a little worse.
I went to the corporate and I wrote to the corporate and I called to the corporate.
They worked against ours, and they made that very clear when I first started working there.
It happens every day.
Emboldened by the MeToo movement, McDonald's workers stage a one-day strike at restaurants in 10 cities to pressure management to take stronger steps against sexual harassment in the workplace. Organizers say it will be the first multi-state strike in the U.S., specifically targeting sexual harassment.
We will analyze the significance of this development in the context of the MeToo movement, women's labor history, and the growing activism and unionism of low-wage workers in the U.S. and around the world.
We're pleased to have Annalise Orlek, professor of history at Dartmouth College and author of We Are All, Yes We Are, Fast Food Workers Now, the global uprising against poverty wages. And we are particularly interested in doing this piece, and we'll be focusing more on sexual harassment in the workplace because we have our own contradictions right here that we have to get management to respond to. So we want to educate, agitate, and organize on this critical issue. So, Annalise, how are we first to understand what constitutes sexual harassment? We heard this little clip previously, which was essentially sexual in nature, very pronounced and demonstrative. But is that the full composition and reality of what the workers face when they are confronted with offensive, gender-based behavior?
No. Obviously, there's a wide range of behavior that creates a hostile environment. That's what the law defines as sexual harassment, creating a hostile environment for women in the workplace. And there are a range of activities that do that. The women in the McDonald's complaints that were filed last May with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and this is 9 cities, 15 complaints, they talked about actual touching, and touching coming up from behind and grabbing a woman's genitals, rubbing up against her with the man's genitals, kinds of things that really border on sexual assault or constitute sexual assault. So that's one end of the range. And, you know, in some cases there may have been more serious assaults in bathrooms where supervisors follow women workers into the bathrooms, in alleyways at the end of the day, and women workers have faced a lot of retaliation for reporting these activities. But there are other things that constitute sexual harassment, sexual comments made day after day, all day long, about a woman's appearance, about what kind of behavior you might want to engage in with her. And of course, the supervisor makes these comments, then other workers feel that they can, and often customers do too. For almost half of women in restaurants and in fast food in particular, they're dealing with this, as one of the women in your clip just said, every day. That's part of their work life every single day.
And we're used to hearing about sexual harassment by the muckamucks, the Trumps and the Kavanaughs, but this is about workers of the world. This is about the workers, in this case of McDonald's, who are doing a one-day strike. Comment on that and significance of that.
Me Too began to get attention when some famous actresses went after a very famous Hollywood producer in the Harvey Weinstein case. But in fact, this McDonald's strike is one part of a very broad movement by working women, particularly low-wage workers, around the world to fight sexual harassment. And so, yes, this is the first multi-city strike to foreground sexual harassment, and it's one of the first strikes against sexual harassment in a century. But what's been happening for the past few years is that tomato pickers, field workers in Florida have been highlighting what they call rape in the fields. And a number of them from the Coalition of Immokalee Workers went on a hunger strike this past March in front of the offices of Wendy's in New York because Wendy's had not signed on to this fair food program they've created that has given them a lot more ability to fight sexual harassment in their workplaces by having the big buyers of tomatoes, the Walmarts, the Taco Bells, the Whole Foods, sign an agreement that they would pay more for tomatoes from growers who allowed workers to organize, who took care of sexual harassment complaints by getting rid of the harassers and settling with the workers, who guaranteed safer conditions. So there's field workers who've been organizing, hotel workers in Chicago, in Miami, in Seattle, in California, have organized for local ordinances that they call hands-on, hands-off. And what that did is it mandated that hotel housekeepers could get panic buttons. So if they were assaulted or threatened in one of the rooms where they worked, and that's the industry where it happens to more workers than in any other, some crazy numbers, like estimates between 2/3 and 3/4 of hotel housekeepers have faced sexual harassment or assault, unwanted touching. So those panic buttons would allow workers to immediately reach hotel security and management. But these ordinances go farther, and in negotiation with Unite Here, with the Hotel Workers Union, they've come up with regulations saying that hotel management has to deal with these issues. They can't retaliate against the workers for reporting them, and they have to sanction, whether it's hotel guests or supervisors. It has to be zero tolerance. Now, what's interesting is that just recently, as a result of the beginning of these laws, 5 of the large hotel chains have said they're going to start supplying their hotel housekeepers with panic buttons. So, one of the things that's happened with the McDonald's workers before, with the hotel workers, is that these campaigns sometimes result in voluntary action by the corporations, and that's, I think, what the McDonald's workers are hoping for from McDonald's corporate. McDonald's has a policy, but they don't enforce it. And women who try to make franchisees or corporate enforce that zero tolerance policy find themselves out of a job, or their pay is docked, or their hours are docked, or they're treated worse, and that's why they're going on strike.
So there's a high level of retaliation. I want you to just dive a little deeper into what low-income workers in particular face. You mentioned the coalition of Immokalee worker women who were protesting against Wendy's. You've mentioned the McDonald's workers, but the specific circumstances and what it means for people who are really low-wage workers and have very, very little power in this society, and that is generally coupled by their gender reality, as well as, I dare say, very oftentimes the racial disparities that exist in this society.
Yeah, absolutely. The majority of low-wage workers in the world are women, and a majority are people of color. This is true in fast food in the United States. Field work, it's not actually true. Field work is one of those low-wage areas where the majority are still men, but men are not facing sexual assault in the fields. Women are, and it's quite endemic. Then you have garment workers. Recent AFL-CIO studies of the garment industry around the world have shown that, women in the garment trades, very low-paid places like Bangladesh and Cambodia and Ethiopia, are facing incredible rates of being not just sexually assaulted, but beaten on the job if they're not working fast enough. And so those folks are organizing too. And last November 25th was an action that was kind of similar to what the McDonald's workers are going to do. It was a multi-country action to protest gender-based violence in the workplace. And they are trying to get the International Labor Organization to pass a convention mandating zero tolerance for sexual violence and sexual harassment in the workplace. And if that happens, different countries ratify these ILO conventions, and then it's national law in those countries. And that's why garment workers have been taking that tack. So I think what you're seeing is that, we've only heard about a handful of famous actresses saying, MeToo and reporting the behavior, the inappropriate, the illegal, the criminal behavior of powerful men. But in fact, this is something that's going on all over the world, and particularly facing low-wage workers. And as for what you talked about, the relationship of their wages to this issue, these are single moms very often. They can't afford to have their pay docked. They can't afford to have their hours docked. They can't afford to, pay a babysitter and then go into work and have the manager say, "Oh, you reported me, you can go home now." There's no give. We have a moment in this country where 50% of workers make under $30,000 a year. That is poverty wages. 70% of American workers make under $50,000 a year. They're barely making ends meet. So to face harassment and face retaliation for reporting it is really, endangers their stability and the stability of their families. And I want to stress that gives you a sense of how much courage it takes.
We're speaking with Annalise Orlick, professor of history at Dartmouth College and author of We Are All Fast Food Workers Now, the Global Uprising Against Poverty Wages. And let's get into the issue of the strike. But first I want to say that this isn't the first time McDonald's has been cornered, has been accused of sexual harassment. So I wonder if you can give us the ongoing context for this targeting of McDonald's.
There was another complaint that was leveled by McDonald's workers, by a number of them in different cities in 2016. And McDonald's did nothing, despite the fact that they claim, now they're saying they're going to bring in trainers from RAIN, which is a very important network that helps women to deal with sexual assault and sexual abuse. That's not a bad thing. That is a response that McDonald's is taking now based on, the organizing of their workers and the publicity they've already gotten and the suits they've already brought. But it also based on something else that is worth mentioning, and that is that 2 years ago, these fast food workers who've been organizing since 2012 won a victory in the National Labor Relations Board when they ruled that McDonald's corporate could be considered a joint employer with their franchise owners, because McDonald's corporate always says, we can't be held responsible for sexual harassment, we can't be held responsible for workers getting hurt on the job, we can't be held responsible for people not being paid for all the hours they work, because those are franchise owners. They're small business owners. We have nothing to do with them. Well, these workers in Fight for 15 and the McDonald's fast food workers movement, brought a successful case 2 years ago in which NLRB said, no, in fact, there's all kinds of reasons why McDonald's
And let me just say that's National
responsible.
Labor Relations Board. So I'm sorry, just wanted to make that clear. Not everybody knows that, but continue,
I'm sorry,
please.
Yes. The National Labor Relations Board. And they, that was created after the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, and that law is still hanging on by a thread. It is still the law of the land, although for how long, who knows. So they are considered joint employers. Now, the new Trump appointee on the National Labor Relations Board issued guidance saying that this should be reconsidered, and so it's questionable for how long McDonald's will continue to be held responsible for how workers are treated in their franchises. But because the new Trump appointee had been involved in the case to try to prevent that original ruling that McDonald's could be considered a joint employer, he had to recuse himself. So for now, McDonald's corporate can still be held responsible under the law for conditions in their franchises.
In addition to the book that we mentioned in opening up the sequence, you've also written a book called Rethinking American Women's Activism.
Yes.
How do you place the position of where we are right now, or where women are right now, in terms of activism versus what happened before?
What's really interesting is I end that book with the words of one of the early McDonald's organizers, actually a Kentucky Fried Chicken organizer, but one of the early organizers of the fast food workers movement, Naquasia LeGrand, who in 2012 was 22 years old and had to commute between 3 jobs to make ends meet, to help her grandmother make ends meet, living far out in Brooklyn, in Canarsie, and having to commute hours and hours to all of her jobs. She did 2 things that reminded me of the past, and I closed that book with this. She quoted Fannie Lou Hamer, the famed sharecropper who said in the 1964 Democratic Convention, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." And she talked about that a lot. And a lot of the young, especially African-American workers in the fast food movement, quote Fannie Lou Hamer, and they believe that they are inheritors of the legacy of the civil rights movement. I spoke to 2 young fast food workers in Tampa, Florida, Blue Rainier and Rika Mack, who were a man and a woman in their 20s, and they said they absolutely feel like they're standing on the shoulders of their grandparents, and they were even trained by some of the 1960s activists when they went down to Georgia. Then there is the way in which Naquasia LeGrand, talking about connecting with other other women on the picket lines and other workers around the world through this struggle, made her feel a sense of community as a woman of color, as a worker. And I closed that book, Rethinking American Women's Activism, by saying how much she sounds like Clara Lemlich, a garment striker from 1909, whose speech set off a big, massive strike of workers across the country. And in 1912, one of those groups of women struck over sexual harassment. In fact, that was the very first strike that I have ever found where sexual harassment was the prime issue. So in many ways, I feel that these workers today are connected to the activists of past decades and even past centuries.
Talk about the organizing that went on for this strike and what specifically the women who will be going out in 10 cities demanding against McDonald's.
Well, they organized through women's committees, and I think that we're seeing a lot of that in organizing in the new labor movement, right? Women, it's almost like the consciousness-raising groups of the women's movement 40 years ago, right? We're seeing women talking to each other about the issues they face, realizing that they're not alone, realizing that their anger can be channeled. It's very much the way Fight for 15 has organized. There's a lot of criticism that, some of it's top-down and all that, but in fact, there's a lot of grassroots discussion among workers, who come to see their place as part of a movement. So they are demanding many things. They are demanding that McDonald's enforce their zero tolerance for sexual harassment policy. They want to see managers sanctioned who are involved in this, if not fired. They're also, once again, talking about a living wage and talking about a regular schedule. Now, New York City is one place where the city council did mandate that workers had to be told their schedule 2 weeks in advance, but in most places, McDonald's workers are not. They're scheduled by algorithm. The computer tells them when they can come and when they can go, and they never know what their hours are going to be. So all of these things, living wage, union rights, but in this case, first and foremost, a safe workplace, free of sexual harassment, free of unwanted touching, free of sexually explicit comments, is what they are demanding.
How important do you think MeToo has been in giving courage, raising up these issues to the broader public, which is creating an environment where more people in the low-wage workers areas can speak out and come to the foreground over this absolutely critical issue to their very identity, being, and personage?
I think that MeToo is getting these workers more attention. MeToo has resulted in the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, in which some of these wealthy Hollywood women who have become involved in the movement have donated large sums of money to provide legal assistance to low-wage women workers who can't afford it, the money to hire lawyers themselves. So I think in all of those ways, this movement has been very beneficial to low-wage workers. But I want to be clear, low-wage workers started this struggle first.
I was waiting for you to say that. Please.
Yeah. They started it first. The Immokalee workers, the garment workers around the world, field workers in a group called Via Campesina, which is a farm workers organization, predominantly female around the world, have been talking about sexual violence in the fields, and hotel workers and restaurant workers. So I feel that, in a sense, the attention of the country has caught up with what these women have been demanding for a long time. And I can only hope that MeToo is now going to, enable some of these working women to get what they are hoping for. And I want to say that the women organizing around the world are not just organizing around sexual harassment and sexual violence, but other women's issues too. Everywhere I went, and I asked people why they were organizing, and this is garment workers, farm workers, hotel workers, fast food workers, they said, we want to fight pregnancy discrimination in the workplace, we want equal pay with men, and we want equal representation in our unions, as well as freedom from sexual violence. So it's really a women's movement, this labor movement, in many, many ways.
And what would you say we need to do on a systemic front? Is it about enforcement, or do we need new pieces of legislation and mandates within the workplace to deal with these issues wherever they arise?
We need both. We need enforcement of existing regulations. We need to test Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which guarantees, women freedom from discrimination in the workplace. And indeed, these complaints that are going into the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission right now echo those that were first brought in 1965 when the EEOA was created. And they were expecting to get racial complaints. What they got overwhelmingly in those first years was complaints about sexual assault and harassment in the workplace. They were shocked, and they didn't quite know how to handle them. So that raises the next question. The laws are blurry. Title IX's protection on campuses against hostile environment, right? Those are blurry, and women are using them, and they have to use them to try to improve their situation. But I think the hands-off, pants-on ordinances in places like Miami Beach and Chicago and Seattle are really important. We do need new laws as well as enforcement of existing laws.
By the way, I just wanted to ask you, I must have missed it. What does RAIN stand for?
Oh, gosh. It's...
Aha.
I wrote about it at Rethinking Women's Activism, but it's the Reporting Abuse Information Network, something like that.
Well, tell us a little bit more about the substance of that. You mentioned it in passing, and it's not something I was familiar with, and obviously should be.
Well, coming out of the last round of women's organizing around sexual violence in the 1970s, or not the last, it's been going on ever since then, but, kind of the last grassroots uprising around these issues and politicizing violence against women, you began to get national networks, national information networks, and battered women's shelters and rape crisis hotlines. And, it is that infrastructure, some of which has been taken over by cities and states and, got a lot of federal funding as a result of the Violence Against Women Act in 1994. All of that has paved the way for a lot of the kinds of institutions that a corporation like McDonald's can now turn to train, to do trainings of their supervisors and their managers. And I think we're dealing with it on my own campus. That is where we need to be right now. There are many other things we need, including genuine zero tolerance, but absolutely to, preventative measures, you need to have managers and supervisors, whether it's at a Ivy League college or at a McDonald's, who are trained so that they understand fully what is not acceptable, what kinds of behavior are not okay. It is not okay to say you don't have a good sense of humor, boys will be boys, right? These are violations of the rights of your workers, and you cannot do that.
And just tell us why, because I don't think a lot of more bourgeois or indeed left people of the male persuasion understand that. Why is that so offensive? It should be obvious, but apparently it isn't, because certainly the question is whether we are regressing or socially progressing, and how we take these issues home to our own workplace.
Well, I think that much as things have changed, there are certain things that haven't, and I think in this moment when the long anti-feminist backlash, right, has brought us elements of our popular culture that are decidedly hostile toward women and sexualizing the bodies of even very young women and girls. And, and you walk into a workplace. Now, I think you're right that you should understand that it is offensive and it is a hostile environment. But in 1965, when these sexual harassment charges first started to be brought to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, you had the New York Times running an editorial that said, oh, come on, banning, sexual banter and sexual harassment in the workplace, you might as well just try to ban sex. It's not going to happen. And obviously, despite the Anita Hill moment, when the country became aware that sexual harassment doesn't only happen in blue-collar environments, it doesn't only happen in low-wage work, it happens in, federal offices and, in elite universities. Even after that, right, this has continued, and we have these cultures that are endemic to various workplaces. And I think it is time for everyone to understand what the phrase hostile environment means. It is an environment in which it is overly stressful for any worker who's being harassed. Hostile environment is what we're fighting, and it's what the McDonald's workers strike to say no more.
All right. Annalise Orlach, professor of history at Dartmouth College, author of We Are All Fast Food Workers Now, the Global Uprising Against Poverty Wages.
I want to thank Mimi Rosenberg and Ken Nash of Building Bridges for allowing me to occasionally air segments of their program. You can find out more about their program at buildingbridgesradio.blogspot.com. And of course, you can always find out more about Labor Express Radio by going to our website at laborexpress.org. That's all for tonight's program. Labor Express is a nonprofit 501c3 member of IBEW Local 1220. Views expressed on Labor Express are those of its producers, not necessarily those of IBEW. Labor Express is a production of the Community for Labor Access in Chicago, the world capital of the labor movement. The song we use as our theme is called Worker Song. It was written by Ed Pickford and recorded by the Dropkick Murphys. Tune in next Sunday at 8 p.m. for another edition of Labor Express.